Well, did the Bush administration want to close down the federal?
Ladies or sisters.
Why are we being recorded for
They're not helping.
For some reason, yet to be explained.
You can't deny your brother.
I have the entire disc of Kate Smith with all her beautiful songs, but not tonight. What was her other signature song besides God Bless America?
When the moon
Yes,
comes
when the
over
moon-
the mountain.
That's on here too. Okay, I wanted to start with Kate Smith because she was one of the favorites of our ancestors. Tonight we're going to talk about the past and our ancestors. She was the #1 female vocalist. We had male vocalists, but she did songs on the radio, television in the early 50s. She did many, many records. So that's what we're talking about tonight, the past. People from the past, ideas, terms from the book, etc. I gave this talk before, and I divided the group. I said those over 50 and those under 50. Those, nobody over 50. Well, those under 50 could maybe learn something that they never knew before. Those over 50, we can refresh your memories. And all of us.
Supposing you're only 50. Right.
That is terrible. Yeah. I got on the bus recently. I said, senior citizen. The bus driver said, I'm sorry. That's what he said. Okay. Now, the ideas from the book, from this book, will be presented tonight. The anthracite idiom, but it has a subtitle. Sundays we are closed, go around the back. That was an actual sign from I was going to say tavern. No, in the olden days, beer garden or bar room. That was an actual sign. Remember, why was that? Because we had laws in Pennsylvania, a color, blue laws, yeah. For example, you're listening to a Phillies baseball game on the radio, sundown, stops. The game has to be continued at a later date. The blue laws. So Sundays we are closed, go around the back. And the back of these taverns had another sign, maybe at an angle, a neon sign, ladies entrance from the past. We don't see that much today, and still, and if it's still hanging on a building. But we didn't have so many ladies going to bar rooms as we do today. You see those young girls going in on escort. That would never happen in the past. I won't give a formal speech tonight. It's up to you. Interrupt at any time. Correction, a comment, a little story, but make it concise because we're limited. We have about an hour for a little program tonight. The book is like a dictionary. The first entry is ABCs. Children did not learn the alphabet. They learned their ABCs, their ABCs, like they owned the ABCs. The last meeting, the previous meeting, we spoke about book publishing and all that. This is the bestseller of all time in northeastern PA. More 3,000 copies were printed. One reason was cheap, too. It touched the hearts of the old people. Your castle on the hill right here, Endicott Johnson, the president of the corporation in Florida, he ordered 12 copies. So that's why we're up to about 3,000. So instead of going through a dictionary, that would be boring, I chose different categories and picked out some terms, and we can talk about them. The first I thought would be appropriate would be food, because you just finished that great repast. Terms at random. The tablecloths. Our ancestors very seldom had a linen or a lace tablecloth. They had oilcloth, remember? That was a standard in our kitchen. We'll talk about food and kitchens. And some of these terms you know, but they were used more so in the past. A person who was always eating, always hungry, was said to have, I know Dale has this problem.
Tapeworm.
Tapeworm, yeah. See, you know it, but it's not used so much today. Yeah, that's true, I think, yeah. Most of our food was manufactured in the home, the kitchen, or butchered from the animals in the backyard. But some, at times, were not. Let's say Stella had company in, and she said, oh, these cookies, I didn't make them, but they were
Store-bought.
well, a little variation, bought. But I'm bringing back these words. That's why the book was so cute. Refrigerators, ice boxes. Everybody had an ice box. The refrigerators came into existence about 1950. Before that, we had crude ones. Remember, they were so tall with a big condenser on top. Before that, ice boxes. These were usually kept on the back porch, a nice shady spot, and ice would be delivered by the iceman. And if he needed a smaller size, he would use an ice pick. And sometimes there were chips in the back of the truck, and on a summer day, the boys would sort of pilfer the ice to keep cool when he wasn't looking. Just like when the sheenie would come around, remember the sheenie? The boys would sort of steal something, try to sell it back. Sheenie, icebox. Now, the iceman would come around maybe twice a week. What would he wouldn't know what to leave unless Mom gave him a sign. There was like a card you put in the window. Maybe at the top would be a 2. Then turn it around, 3 would show at the top. That would be a signal to the iceman. The ice would melt, and the family dog may spend some time there keeping cool. But you wouldn't put hot food in the ice box. I'll bet all of you still won't put hot food in the ice box, right? That's a carryover. I'm from the refrigerator, is what I want to say. That's a carryover from the ice box. But the experts say there's no problem with putting warm food into a modern refrigerator. But see how items carry over from our ancestors? You all know oil and margarine. What preceded that? Starts with a B.
Lard.
Butterine. Butterine. That was invented by a man from Binghamton. And especially during World War II, with the shortages, people went to butterine. But the dairy industry did not want it to look like butter. So when Mom would go to the market, you remember, you get a packet, you know, a stiff cellophane container, and you'd get some pellets with it. And they would have to be mixed in, rolled, and kneaded, and then it would look like butter to placate the dairy industry. They didn't want it. Some terms at random. Tea bag. The tea bag was invented in 1904. Before that, we had tea balls. This is how another thing is carried over. My father in modern times would refer to a tea bag as a tea ball. You know, in the 1970s or whatever. As children, speak for myself, we never heard the term coleslaw. No, Mom would make
Chopped cabbage.
cabbage salad, and the kiddies would stand around waiting for the core, which was called what? The stump. The stump, and the kids would love that. Well, after they put salt on it, it was rather bitter. That's similar to licking the bowl. Remember that? We don't do that so much today because many of our cakes are okay. Some of our food not made at home was delivered. What's the name of the person who would deliver the fruits and vegetables? Huckster. About twice a week, coming to the local areas. We have a term from Carbondale down called down the line and up the line. Well, down the line, we had Huckster, Shink the Huckster. Did he come up this far? No, you know. Mr. Kowalewski from Carbondale was a huckster. Well, they were some of the names that I knew. We had butcher wagons, taking meat around to homes. And of course, the milkman, which you know about. But the milk came in glass bottles. Milkman would leave it, and Mom would leave the empties out, washed clean, of course, and he would take them, refill them. But milk was not homogenized then. Remember the top of thick milk? That thick, heavy cream, which some people would actually consume. They didn't care about the heaviness. And I think Ma would, you like that?
I just wanted to say that Andy's grandfather started Crowley Foods.
Crowley?
In Binghamton,
Really?
door to door, peddling milk. And we have a picture of him on the wagon. The horse used to fall asleep, deliver the milk, and then go back to the dairy.
Maybe he fell asleep too. So early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, that was early. So Mr. Crowley?
Crowley
Yeah.
Foods
Oh,
farm.
that was one of the biggest. There was another line, I don't think it was Crowley, a line of a dairy called Golden Guernsey. That was, I think, had that heavy, thick cream. Ma could also make whipped cream from that, couldn't she? If the kids didn't consume it as a treat. We did have stores, company stores, and then the little stores before the Grand Union and the A&P across the street. The basic meats were salt, pork, and beef. They were the basics for those stores. And our people had animals in the backyard, chickens, of course. The Irish liked their eggs. And the Germans kept a pig, a hog. Why would the Germans eat the pig? For the pork to accompany their beloved sauerkraut. That was more so with the Germans. It seems in the past, at our, well, the midday meal was dinner. The third meal was supper. In other places of the country, maybe more sophisticated than Forest City or Lackawanna County, we would have dinner as the third meal. Well, there also is a distinction, the difference between Democrats and Republicans, you know that? Democrats have supper at 5 o'clock, Republicans have dinner at 6 o'clock. That was one difference. But Sunday dinner, that was special. And sometimes, well, maybe predominantly we'd have chicken. And people would talk more. They didn't have to rush out to the soccer game or a golf match, something like that. But they talk about the food. The gizzard, remember that term? The gizzard, and people always thought they didn't like the gizzard. And what was this? The wishbone, always looking for the wishbone, short but got the wish. Another term. How about if I give the definition, you tell me the word, term. The part of the chicken that goes over the fence left. Higher up. Higher up. The Pope's nose. The Pope's nose. It's common talk. Those were words used in the past. I had a little survey here. 1920. We all had grandchildren or little brothers or something like sisters. It said that kids were really healthy until age 3. Why? Because at that time, they threw away the bottle, or maybe the mother's milk, and they became less healthy. That was from a survey made. Okay, that was one category. The next is health. In this book, there are old-fashioned proverbs. To start health, the one I liked was from our ancestors. Sometimes you have to get awfully sick to get better. That's their philosophy. Sometimes you have to be awfully sick to get better. No, I chose some medical terms at random. Constipation was not used so frequently. There was another word starting with the B, like eat too much cheese. It's binding. as opposed to constipation. Upset stomach, people would take baking soda. Yeah, but it wasn't called baking soda. There it is, saleratus. That was so common to our ancestors. Saleratus. And if we went to extremes, kosher cookies, you've heard that. And the opposite may be called the run. Well, speaking of the run, you just ate. All of our ancestors had outhouses in the backyard. They were known as one-holers or two-holers. And people have had this problem. There was another term they used, it's in the book. They would do the, where's the camera? Back door two-step. Yeah, that's it. That was going through the back door to get to that outhouse. While we're on the topic of outhouses, tipping an outhouse was one of the main tricks at trick or treats. Lots of fun, except to the person sitting inside. Trick or treat, Halloweening. What was the term used by our ancestors? Not Halloweening, but breed-joking. Did you ever hear it? No. Common term. Breed-joking.
Sir, children used to suffer very often from impactions, which you never hear today.
Maybe, would you hold a minute? I might have it coming right up.
Okay. I thought you were through that segment of this.
Okay, if I don't say it, then you correct, okay? When we have these problems, we may seek help. Not in a pharmacy, but in a drugstore. To see the druggist instead of the pharmacist, as we say today. Maybe all of you experienced this also. 13 years old, oh Ma, I feel terrible, it hurts all over, I'm sore.
Growing pains.
Yes, you have growing pains. Go lay down. That's what they say. Just relax, rest or something like that. We still have growing pains, but you don't use that word so much today. I don't think when you go to the doctor, you might say you have some terrible disease or something. A problem with the chest, mother would make a concoction called
Mustard plaster.
mustard plaster is the word I'm looking for, yeah. Yeah, and some of these terms were warnings by parents. Don't put dirty fingers near your mouth. You'll get hydrophobia. Oh, Ma, not the dreaded hydrophobia. I'm looking for that again. In modern times, after that, we use it for synonym for rabies, of course. I never saw a child with rabies. Now, maybe this is it. Another diagnosis by Mom. I don't feel too well, upset stomach. What you need is a good cleaning out. What you need is a good cleaning out. And the basic was castor oil. Castor oil. Did you hate that as I did? Mom tried to sneak it in orange juice. And it looked like a high school chemistry class with the acid going down. And I had to consume that. That was terrible. And if you had a sore throat, there was a special kind of medicine. Father.
Tonsilline.
That's what I was thinking of. Father John's. He grew up on that, and he lived this long. He speaks well. Father John's medicine. Our ancestors, they had a philosophy. They didn't know it. No, how do you say that? No pain, no gain. Father John's, it tasted terrible, didn't it, Mr. Thing? Oh, what a taste. And castor oil.
Yeah, keep it in the refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, with his picture, I don't know if it was a real Father John. Yeah. We had some medicines, you might say, to help people. They were called tonics, especially in the fall. And the basic ingredients of a tonic, sulfur and molasses. We also had a commercial tonic throughout the valley. I don't know if it came this far. There was a big family down there, Bosack. He started 2 banks. He helped the immigrants. It was Bosack's Jorge Vino.
Jorge Vino, exactly.
Oh, you've heard that?
Sure.
Yeah. Here. Let's say, make 1931 a year of good health for you. Bosax Jorge Vino. Big family down the valley. Now, with respect to Barack Obama, there's a lot heard today about condoms. In the book from the past, the synonyms were rubbers or strippers. No, we're talking about history. That's the way it
Some things never change though, do they?
Oh, wait till I tell you the slogan that was on it, that changed. Now, where could these be purchased? Today, you can see them in stores, on shelves. But in the past, the young men would have to go to the restroom of a restaurant. There was a vending machine. The boys would put in a quarter and get, and the basic brand was Trojan brand, that's an old-fashioned word. But I like the slogan, sold for the prevention of disease only. There's the boy putting his quarter in the machine. Where was Obama when these boys needed free? Our ancestors were deeply affected by the Spanish flu of 1918. Statistics for Scranton are available. 6,000 people contracted the disease. 1,000 died. They would quarantine homes, put signs on them. So if you're doing genealogical, looking up your family, you might have a gap because they were buried so quickly. They don't have time to go to Scotch List or something. I want this born and died and buried. And that was the year of the big war, 1918. So you may find a gap when you're looking for your people. I opened the window and influenza. I'm not finished. I opened the window and influenza. I opened the door and influenza. Well, they didn't laugh about that. People were dying. It was just a terrible tragedy called the Spanish flu. Another term, a stiff neck. You have a blank in the neck? Crick. Or a kink. A kink in the neck. Do you say that anymore to your grandchildren? But kink in the neck, crick was popular. And kids, today, they may be overactive. And there are names for that, LADS or something. Well, we don't have that in the past. They'd say, what's wrong with you? You have ants in your pants? And the kid would be a word, fidgety. The kid was fidgety. And the parent would say, what's wrong? You have St. Vitus stance? St. Vitus stance? What was St. Vitus stance? These poor kids, hydrophobia. St. Vitus stance. Oh, I won't. It was an actual disease, a neurological. Who had it? We didn't know, you know. Of course, we had mental illness. And every town had characters, you know, maybe standing in the corner, causing a disturbance or something like that. Some synonyms from the book. He or she, let's say, he's not right, he's not all there. Like the speech at Fargo, the guy got up to speak, and he said, why are we all here? And the guy back said, well, because we're not all there. He's titched in the head. Words I use tonight, I'm not criticizing. We're historians. That's the way it was. Our people use these words. He's cuckoo.
Yeah.
Well, he's not. We had one place for treating mental illness, Northeastern Virginia. The Hillside Home. Maybe you treated at home, but this was a place that evolved into Clark Summit State Hospital, yes. Speaking of hospitals, we had polio. Polio, I hate to use the word more popular, but it was more common, let's say. You've heard it back then, but not too much today. A synonym for polio was, 2 words? Infantile paralysis. Our ancestors used that. There was one hospital for treating that in Scranton, East Mountain, the municipal hospital. Some of our ancestors, maybe neighbors, had a disease of the lungs,
TB.
tuberculosis, TB, and that was like a prison. They couldn't stay at home, right? They had to go to the, well, what name? The West Mountain Sanitarium, West Mountain of Scranton. 2 more terms from the health. Speaking of hospitals, can you put yourself back now? Think of 1950. You're visiting someone in a hospital. You open the door and you're struck by that odor. Do you remember it?
Carbolic.
And formaldehyde and maybe a mixture with ether. Yeah, there was a distinct odor in every hospital. One more term from health. Our shoe stores had X-ray machines. Anybody experience that? Yeah. Where? Forest City?
I don't think so. There was one in Carbondale.
Carbondale and Scranton. The big stores. You put, those who don't know it, you just walk up on a little stand, put your foot in, and you're, oh, kids, boys, oh, look at the foot. Now we're dying of cancer, you know. We didn't talk about cancer. They didn't know about, that was an X-ray going into the body. Why? Because you could see your foot, and was it squeezed, or did it have room, you know, on the X-ray machine. Okay, I mix now some ethics, religion, and marriage. Today, if you call someone by an ethnic slur, racial, it's not right. It's vulgar, obscene, immoral, whatever. But you're all history buffs. Once again, you can't deny what was said in the past, right? We use such terms as, for the Welsh, cheese eaters. We have Mick, Spick, Hunky, Pola, Dago. Remember Dago red wine? Our Italian neighbors had the grapevine in the backyard, and they made that delicious wine, Dago red. And there was a term wop. But that may have some official standing without papers instead of a slur. But that was a possibility there. Speaking of Italians, we had an organization called the Black Hand. And it was real, because I have something from the newspaper. The Italian priest, 1907, demanded a crackdown on the Black Hand. The word was they are going to wage war on the Black Hand. But of course, the Irish had Molly Maguire's, not too much up here, but in the lower coal regions, they were violent. They were murders. The Welsh had a society called the Rebeccas. Rebecca Avenue is in Scranton, named for the Rebeccas. Speaking of Italians, I grew up near a tavern, a bar room, and the Italian men would hang out there. In the back, they would play volleyball. We call it at the local community, volleyball. You don't see that locally anymore, but in today's paper, big story, paid for by the taxpayers, right? Not the old Italian men coming out of the bar. And the other game of the Italian men, you know, Italian men deep voices in the bar, I could hear them outside. The game was Morda. Any Italians? They would stand in a circle and how many? Quattro, Cinque, Cinque. He has a rather a light voice. Think of the deep Italian voice with all the, I don't know what the goal was, to match fingers or something like that. And then someone later jokingly called it Italian inventory. Uno, due, but it was a game and they loved it. Big pastime. Polish terms, these are still in use. The Vigilia, is that the way you pronounce it? The Vigil? No? At Christmas, the Vigil, the Vigilia. And at Christmas, we have the wafers. You know them? Oplatki. Yeah, more used probably in the past. Oplatki. The Irish, maybe 2 kinds of people, lace curtain Irish and shanty Irish. Many of our towns had a low life section called Shantytown. It was Shantytown. in various places. The Irish had a word for a stupid person, an Irish. Starts with the name. Amada. When was the last time you called someone an Amada? But it was pretty popular in the past. The Irish often went into police work because we have the vehicle called the paddy wagon. Irish. Some of the old police stations were known as the Irish Clubhouse. So many Irish there. And we had an expression, off the boat. People with an accent or broken English, it could be here for a couple of years. He just got off the boat. Irish especially were superstitious, more so than others. You've heard these terms, banshees. Yeah. And what's that other one? Leprechauns. Leprechauns. They were the good guys because they knew where the gold was hid. The leprechauns. And the fairies, some good, some bad. Our people had a slogan, don't throw your tablecloth, don't shake your tablecloth out at night, or the fairies will get you. They didn't shake their tablecloths out. A howling dog in the neighborhood would indicate a death is going to come. If you visit a wake, not a wake, a corpse house? A corpse house. I said wake. If the deceased had a soft skin, a death was to follow rather quickly after. That was a superstition. Don't wash blankets in the month of May. Oh, I hope you didn't. Don't wash blankets in the month of May, and there will be no swimming before St. John's Day. No, don't go swimming before St. John's Day.
And don't buy a broom in May.
Don't buy a broom in May, and wash new clothes before wearing. The Polish had superstition. Let's say at a Polish wedding, if that's the altar, the bride is over there, and the groom over. If a candle went out on the bride's side, someone from that family would die shortly. Likewise, the groom's side, there was a death coming into that family. Okay.
Are you still on deaths? Are you still on death and gruesome things?
No, let's move to religion.
Well, I was gonna say, because my mother would always make us touch the stove when we came back from the corpse house, because the next person that you would touch was gonna die. We did that all gruesome.
Don't buy a broom in May, right?
A broom also?
Yeah.
Speaking of May, 2 weeks ago, some of you celebrated, or whatever, Memorial Day, but it wasn't Memorial Day in the past. Decoration Day, and the date was always the 30th of May. It wasn't this Monday, long weekend. I was told there were no religious schools in Forest City. I was going to mention a term and use down the line, sister school. Those were the schools belonging to a parish. My kid might say, I go to the sister school. But I do believe you had some nuns from Forest City, and the expression there in the past was that she would take the veil. That was what meant becoming a nun. Speaking of veils, there's another sort of a superstition, born with the veil. You've heard that? Yes, the membrane at birth, that's called the call, C-A-U-L. C-A-U-L, the call. And if this, especially women who were born with this, later on they were said to have psychic powers. And the call was also a good luck piece. When our ancestors came over the pond, they would keep that to be prevented from drowning. Some more religion. Women. This is maybe Catholic and Byzantine, I don't know about Orthodox. After they gave birth, They would, and would be purified, go maybe a weekday when it's quiet, and the priest would say prayers, and it was called being churched. You don't hear that anymore. But we've never heard it before, but you're so young. They were churched.
I had to get church.
This I brought for a couple reasons. Our ancestors were fairly religious. This is called the Infant of Prague. But I brought it for another reason. At the bottom, there's a dime. And what does that mean?
I don't know, but we always had them on our statues, a dime on the bottom.
Right? She didn't know what it means, but she always had it, see?
Yeah.
Superstition, like good luck. That's been there about 60 years. And I think this statue was one at Rocky Glen Park, by the way.
Yeah.
With the coin. See? Our people were so religious, maybe, and even so Catholic, you might say. That's sort of a satanic superstition in a sense. And the Catholic Church, I know they said the people shouldn't go to fortune tellers. But our women did. But this is a big thing. Fortune tellers. Yeah. You don't see many of them much around. Almost every town had their fortune teller. And I just, in the book I have all kind of sayings, slogans. One here, how do you describe a homely neighbor? She would sour a pan of milk. She has a face to sour a pan of milk. Okay, marriage. The basic, are we running over about half? No. Okay. We're limited to about 1 hour, by the way. The basic rule for marriage was marry your own kind.
Yeah.
Marry your own kind. And it happened most of the time also. Terms at random. After the bride and groom would retire to their quarters, a crowd would gather outside, making all kind of noise, pots and pans. Did it at your wedding?
That's shivaree.
Oh, who said that? Yeah,
Shivaree.
that's the word I was leading to.
That's from Oklahoma. They do that in Oklahoma.
Well, I have it here, so that was local in the
Yeah.
past, you know, just a way to celebrate the marriage. Pots and pans, bang, a shivaree.
Horning.
I have a survey, 1904. It said most girls married in the autumn of the year, not of their life. It was the opposite usually. And it said they married indiscriminately. So how many of us are products of indiscriminate marriages? And what does that mean? An example, let's say the father was injured in the mines or killed. 5 young girls. They couldn't stay at home. They had to get a man. And being in that rush, see, it was indiscriminate in a sense. They did not have a long courtship if they had to rush into it. But isn't it true there were a few divorces back then, as opposed to 50% now? But I think a lot of our women, from my observation, they suffered. The man might have been a drunk or whatever, and they stayed with dad. And the man of the house, of course, from the book says, he was called himself. Himself says this, or himself sits at the end of the table for the chicken dinner.
You know why they didn't get divorces in those days? Because you're going to go to hell if you got a divorce.
You mean they don't go now? It was religion, yeah. It was. I think there was more to it than just religion, wasn't there? It wasn't right. Where could this girl go? Where could she go? She had to stay with the old drunk. That's a term, by the way. Our ancestors would refer to someone, he's an old drunk. But they also used the word, the sickness. That was used in the past, the sickness. Okay, our marriages now, we still have the Polish weddings, the customs, with the bride lifting the gown and the men dancing with her, putting money in. That's very Polish, but it carries over. I have an example here, down around Shenandoah, which is cold country. This young bride took in $160 back 50, 60 years ago. She'd be wealthy on that. she would need this other thing girls brought to their marriage.
Dowry.
Well, I don't know about a dowry, but a hope chest. A hope chest. They don't have that so much today, do they? No. A hope chest. Girls with, maybe in the cedar chest, towels and blankets, etc., to prepare for this indiscriminate marriage. Okay. Illegitimate children. There was a term for them, you might say. They were born on the wrong side of the sheets. I didn't make that up. They were born on the wrong side of the sheets. Wedding receptions usually in the backyard, and the chairs may be borrowed from the church or the undertaker. There was a song sung at wedding receptions. Do you remember it? I think it was more common than anything else. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad. She was a pearl and the only girl that daddy ever had. A hard girl with hearts. But that was the basic song. I need a girl. How would couples meet? Maybe at a church social. We had dances. Every church had a dance almost. You pay a quarter. There were, for let's say the little upper class ballrooms, if you want to go to Scranton, something like that. Chapin Lake had a ballroom. Yeah. Was that the Elmo Ballroom, or that was Hotel Chapin? But that was one thing. And church dances. I want to say, today we have items in the paper, personal calls. You know, I want to meet a nice lady who can cook. I love Volsky and Gushnack. And what I like to take a walk along the D&H tracks on a Sunday afternoon. Walking the tracks on a Sunday afternoon was a pastime. I can remember there were like ashes walking. But anyway, we didn't have personal calls back then. We had something called the Lonely Hearts Club. Lonely Hearts Club. Now, you don't have to say if that's how you met your spouse, but these were chapters in various cities. I have a year, 1939. The club from Bayonne, New Jersey, right across the river, had their outing in Alfred. 300 people attended. See? Oh, maybe they can meet somebody there? Or not watch your phone number because we didn't have phones. Maybe I can take the wagon up to your house sometime. But a little later on, we had phones with multiple parties called party lines. You know, just heard that. Pick it up if there's somebody on. Oh, hang up. No, people were very slow. Party lines. But this Lonely Hearts Club, there's a joke. It's probably not true. This fella said he wanted to meet a nice lady. He sent his picture into the headquarters. A week later, the picture was returned to him with a little note. Sorry, we're not that lonely. Okay, the last full sheet I have here. Culture. What did our ancestors do? I think we have a mistaken idea that everybody was a coal miner. He was always dirty with the soot on, you know, worked so hard. It wasn't that way. Do you realize that no coal miner ever worked a full year?
No.
And well, that was true. And probably some of you remember coming home maybe from Hillside, you'd see the coal miner at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, carrying what? The dinner pail. And that dinner pail had a top on it for liquids, and maybe he'd get home at night, he'd send the kids to the bar room, and that had a term.
Look at a beer.
Yeah, but the actual term was called rushing the growler.
The growler, a growler.
Yeah, rushing the growler. But speaking of activity like that, movies. Let's say 1900. You know, you want to split 1900 before and after. After 1900, we had silent movies. All these towns had little movie houses. Well, some were big, maybe 300 or 400 people. we call them silent, but the inside were not silent because they had a piano player. And if there was, let's say, a Western where the cowboy galloped away, the piano player would speed up the tempo, you know, or maybe a funeral dirge or something like that. And Forest City is quite unique. Anthracite plus rural. You also have like some logging in the area, besides the actual coal mining and some farming. So we're at movies, right? Talkies. What year did talkies come about? Well, 1920. And the first one is said to be Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer. Yeah, that's considered the first. We had movie houses, I told you. Right here in Forest City, you had one. I was thinking of the Family Theater.
Friedman.
Yeah, that may be the first.
The first, that we're going way back. And what was the start of your movie houses in Forest City? The Family is the name I have. And the year was 1908 when it started over here. December 17th, by the way, 1908, you got your first theater in Forest City. And there was an exceptional person, one of the small Jewish communities in Forest City, Samuel Rothfeld.
Roxy.
Yes, his nickname was Roxy. He was an exceptional man. He left here after a few years. He went to Manhattan and he started the Roxy Theater on 50th Street, if you know that. It was torn down in 1960. It's like the Masonic Temple. Tremendous. Then he moved over to Radio City. He had the Roxyettes, which became Rockettes. Maybe some of you have seen them. From your boy Roxy, right here, the Roxyettes became the Rockettes.
You know where the Vitaphone originally came from?
Sir,
The Vitaphone?
tell us.
Tommy Watkins was the guy that first started that, and Roxy got it from him.
Really?
Right in Forest City, and he lived right behind Smith's furniture store above the garage. Tommy Watkins.
Watkins.
He started the Vitaphone, but he could never finish it because they told me Roxy acquired it from him.
Maybe he did the same thing like in Radio City. He got some maybe rich friends. He had some money. But he was a stickler. In the movie house, his ushers, they had to be perfect. And who was leading the ushers? He had a Marine to get the ushers in line. That was your man, Roxy. Started here in Forest City. He was here about 5 years in town. He wasn't born here. He was born in Minnesota. These theaters, if you call that, were called Nicolettes or Nickelodeons. Yeah, that was for a nickel you could come. Sometimes in the past, take a can of food and you'd get in free. It was for the war effort or the poor or whatever. Radios, about 1930. The Lone Ranger was one of the first programs. I like trivia. What was the name of that song? You all know that. That's it, the William Tell Overture. Yeah. And we had Fibber McGee and Molly. A personal favorite of mine in the 40s, Thursday nights at 8:30. Mr. Keene.
Tracer of Lost Persons.
Tracer of Lost Persons, yes. Good. The other one I didn't like. Its competitor was called Inner Sanctum. Yeah, I didn't like that. And we had programs after school. The boys would rush home. Sky King, Terry and the Pirates, and all that. And there's another one, a very popular, you know, the carriage. Where are you going tonight, Kingfish? You're going down to Richmond Hill to meet a girl, you know. Amos and Andy. Yeah, that was popular. And there was no criticism. They were white people, I think, with the accent. We had newspapers. See, not everybody worked in the coal mines, and even the coal miners. We had opera houses down the valley, and libraries developed, newspapers. Carbondale had two way back. Mayfield, a little town, the Mayfield News. Archbold had a paper called the Archbold Citizen. And Forest City, Mr. Kameen knows more than anybody. And when did your paper start here?
1887,
Was it called the Forest City News?
called the Forest City News. This is our 125th year.
And how about circulation? Was it more than let's say, 2,000?
We have about 3,000 now, but the largest number that I know they had was about 3,800. But if one family would buy the paper, and they would read it and give it to their next door neighbor, and they give it to their next door neighbor, and so on. It made a lot of, covered a lot of territory.
Yeah. Reminds me of the telephones. We didn't have telephones until 1940, 50. The neighbor, the wealthy neighbor had one. You'd go over there to make a telephone call. And that maybe be a private line for those wealthy people at that time. Newspapers. And back then, the comics had a different name. The funnies, yeah, that's it. Our ancestors used that word. Funnies. Did you read the funnies? For example, Blondie, Mutt and Jav. Yeah, I was going to say, what was his song?
Popeye the Sailor Man.
Popeye.
The Sailor Man.
But he had a slogan too on it. I know what I am, or who I am, or something like that. I am what I am. Yeah.
I am what I am.
Our ancestors went to parks, and I assume Forest City had church excursions, and you'd probably go to Lake Lador, Lake Ariel, close. And right over here in the west, I would guess some people from Forest City walked to Newton Lake Park, a great amusement park, and swimming there. We had Songfest, the Welsh people, remember? They'd have contests, and pronunciation there. No, that's, I know that one. The other one, Eshtafad, and the other is the Gamanfagani. They were like a contest. The Welsh loved music. Some education terms. Our minors went to something called continuation school. Continuation school. I have a term here from teachers. Teachers today have in-service days. Back 20, 30, 40 years ago it was
Teachers Institute.
Yes, Teachers Institute. They didn't call them in-service days. There was a special boy. He was an outstanding, let's say in 7th grade. He would lead the kids across the street at the intersection. He'd have a badge from the AAA.
Patrol boy.
Patrol boy, yeah.
Crossing cars, too.
He was.
Crossing cars. Her father, Chris Rodbell.
Oh, yeah, that made him feel great to have the accoutrements.
Patrol boy.
Patrol boy. Now, some of our activities were not of the best kind. People drank a lot. It is said that the Irish drank. That's history, that's the way it was. I have an example from a priest. A boy went to confession with that problem. He said, son, this is a problem we Irish have. And I could say that. You know the difference between an Irish wake and an Irish wedding?
One less drunk.
Reminded something of the Polish wedding. I didn't say the length of time. The Polish wedding may last for 3 days, it said. Yes, which reminds me of the Irish
Irish
corpse,
wake.
Irish wake. They go for
In their house.
And Dale just made a recording. He's doing a historical piece. The corpse was set up in the corner.
Standing up in the corner, yeah.
Stand up in the corner. Oh, wow. Well, if they're dead, they can stand up.
I know, but even so.
I'll knock some other people too tonight.
It was hard to put a drink in his hand if you didn't.
I mentioned some people would refer to as this poor fellow. Was it a sickness or was it an evil habit? He's an old drunk. That was a term used. And they also said the sickness. Alcoholism was the sickness. I took some synonyms from the book. He's on a tear, a binge, a bender, a jag, and a worse was a crying jag. He's plastered, he's pie-eyed, he's soused, he's in his cups, he's a toper. And during the Depression especially, we had speakeasies, but our ancestors did not call them speakeasies. They were called a hole in the wall. And these were often set up by women. I know in my hometown we had Leaping Lena. She had a hole in the wall. And these people, the men would come for a drink to the hole in the wall. The Irish made their own drink. Walsh, the drink of the Irish, pochine.
Pochine.
Yes,
Pochine,
and
yeah.
it smelled terrible, pochine. The Hungarians had a drink, Polinki. Polinki, that was a home brew. Now, maybe this man drank because of the nagging wife. Well, you have a problem in the home. The wife doesn't like what he's doing, he's drinking too much. He would do this. What is that? Take the pledge. Go to the parish priest. It's not funny. These poor women. He'd go to the parish priest and the pledge.
But the priest and both get drunk.
Yeah, really.
Okay. Now, what's the lowest form of entertainment? We had brothels in Northeast. And they were called cat houses. For that too. Little cat houses. Scranton was infamous for that. About 1920, 30, there were 40 in Scranton. And a young man could pay $1 to be entertaining. A house may be run by a woman older with a bevy of females. It was so bad, the commander at Toby Hanna, it had a different name then, munitions or whatever, he forbade his soldiers to go into the city of Scranton because of that.
Archie Bunker used to come to Scranton.
And they moved.
We used to have one of those in Richmondville,
One of the shows they were talking about.
one of those
Yeah, I heard that.
houses.
Yeah, small towns had it, but you didn't
Oh, we
have
now
40.
know something about Richmondville, don't we?
You could have-
On the website.
You could probably name names, but don't name it.
Would Joe Benny sound familiar to you?
The Ku Klux Klan was in Clifford to keep out the hot-blooded Irish boys.
There you go.
Reminds me of the difference between Democrats and Republicans. You said dinner and supper. Republicans marry Republican girls, but before marriage, they date Democrat girls. Why? Because they wanted to have a good time before they got married. This is Aunt Jenny's cookbook. Was she on the radio? It's so old, you know, sponsored by Spry. Is that still so old? Spry. Aunt Jenny. We had these programs like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but reminded me, somebody mentioned Richmondale. You can't see it, the picture of a boxer born in Richmondale.
Wildcat O'Connor.
His name there is, his real name, Walter Mattis Sr.
Yeah.
He had the, what's his nickname or stage name?
Wildcat O'Connor.
Wildcat O'Connor. He was from Richmondale, but it said he boxed out of Forest City. That was one
Nobody
of
knew
our...
where Richmond. Nobody knew where Richmondale was.
Yes.
The city was more well known down there.
Like I think on that, Dale just did a recording. Yeah, the man was from Archbold. He was in the Marine Navy, on the Navy ship. Oh, where are you from? He said, Scranton. We always say that. You visit somebody in New York, maybe not up here, but we in the Mid-Valley, where are you from? Scranton. And I'm not from Scranton. They say that because they don't know German, Archbold, Einen, or something like that. But Walter Mattis, he fought 100 bouts, and he won 80.
Wow.
He was pretty good.
He had a brother that was a boxer too.
But he wasn't that good, was he? As Walter?
He had a brother.
Did he have a nickname?
I don't remember his nickname.
Wildcat.
Yep. Smoking cigarettes. Cigarettes, I remember being 23 cents. But those vending machines, you know, like the Commons, for example, they were not sophisticated. They couldn't give nickels and dimes and change. You had to put a quarter in, and change would come back how?
These were in the cellophane.
The pennies, 2 pennies, placed inside the cellophane cigarettes. You know, don't put in a quarter and you get 2 pennies back. They were in the package. And some of the brands were Camel, Lucky Strike, you know.
Johnny Philip Morris.
Okay. And they're smoking, they would use something like half and half, or Clark and Snover, maybe for their corn cob punch.
I'm a collector. Watch it.
Okay, well, I have to finish up now, so we won't explain the terms, maybe just mention some. At the previous meeting, Mr. Kameen had a picture of a black-faced actor or whatever, from a minstrel show. Minstrel shows were popular. Some of the words, beggars. We had beggars in the past, door to door. When was the last time you saw a beggar? That was a term from the past. Your DPW had a particular name. The head of the DPW. Oh, that's modern. He was a pathmaster. Pathmaster. Gypsies would come with the carnivals, and the police chief would get them out. The police chief was backed by state law. Get rid of the gypsies. Just some quick terms. We didn't pick blueberries, we picked huckleberries.
Huckleberry Mountain, there it is.
Right there in front of you.
You mentioned death. We'll finish up there. Some terms, synonymous, whatever. If a person was almost gone, or after death, he was a goner.
Oh, yeah.
I did this book and people said I got so many laughs, so much fun out of it. Okay. A person who is terminal, and our ancestors did not know the name terminal. The person is, how are you feeling? He would say, one more clean shirt. And then he or she upped and died.
Oh, yeah. It's up to that.
After the death rattle, of course.
Yeah.
We talked about death rattle. For example, the sofa in the house was called a davenport or a teat, for example. Okay, our hour is almost up. If we do have time, there's stuff I brought quickly. A washboard and these.
Alleys.
Good. Mark's in that too. I thought everybody was going to say marbles. No, it's alleys.
With the string.
The first television show, Howdy Doody. Yeah. It's Howdy Doody time, like that. And those chickens we talked of, this scale is almost 100 years old. You put the chicken on there, and the chicken with the head cut off, that's another lecture. You know, that actually happened. You ever seen chicken with the head cut off? Oh, terrible sight. This was for capping bottles, canning in the fall.
Beer bottles.
Or ketchup especially. You know, if you made your own beer.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Speaking of beer, two of the brands, these are old ones, Kyers and Gibbons, making toast on the coal stove. Or when they seldom had a steak on top. I think of the oven, these, they had a name, Dixon stoves or something like that. I remember another use for them. Grandma may sit with her feet in them to keep warm in the oven. But as children, writing a letter to Santa Claus, we put the letter in the oven. And what would happen? It would disintegrate. Santa has our letter.
That's a good trick. Let's save the state.
From the project
Got a squirt gun?
See?
Cap gun?
No, a cap has powder, you might say.
Yeah.
This is plain paper. Could I fire it?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you got caps.
Paper. Look at it. Well, I just brought it. That's about going on 65 years old. That was a toy, an adding machine. I'm forgetting you over that.
No, that's all right.
1950,
Oh, my God.
like that.
One just like that.
Speaking of Endicott Johnson, people want to repair shoes at home.
There's no need for those things.
Before the grand finale, I brought a souvenir for people who wanted a little thank you for paying attention, being so nice. I'll have about 30, so one to a family, and if not, I'll bring them next time. If we only had time, we'd have a trivia contest. I want to give these away. Humphrey Bogart, if anybody's a fan. Humphrey Bogart. Okay, now the grand finale after death. The book ends with a poem. It goes like this. And now we are aged and gray, Maggie. The trials of life nearly done. Let us sing of the days that are gone, Maggie, when you and I were young.
Oh,